Welcome to the Lancashire Cyber Foundry's engagement event. My name's Rebecca Robinson. Really like to welcome you here today. We are live. We have our panel members here, which I'll introduce you to in a moment. Just a couple of housekeeping. We'd be grateful if you could keep your cameras on during this Zoom call. We will be recording the session and we will potentially be using that for marketing material in the future, but also it'll be put on our YouTube channel for people to look at as well at their own leisure. If you have any questions, which I am sure you will have, please could you message directly to Mark Murray. Unfortunately, we don't have any audio here at the moment, so we can't hear you, but Mark can. So if you can contact him directly, that'd be great. Really hope you enjoyed listening to that animation at the beginning of our session. It tells you all about our project that we do and the support that we offer businesses across Lancashire. If you want to know more information, our email address is cyberfoundry@lancaster.ac.uk, and all of the support that we offer is fully funded for those companies who are eligible. So let's get to it. Let's start our engagement event. I would really like to introduce you to our panel members. So we've got Kate, John and Geraint. Kate, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hello, Rebecca. Hello, everybody. My name's Kate Houlden. I am Managing Director of Light Technologies. We are based in Lancaster and we are a cybersecurity support company.
Thank you. John?
Hi, I'm John Couzins. I'm the IT Security Manager at Lancaster University. I work out of the Technical Infrastructure Group.
Thank you. And Geraint?
Hi, I'm Geraint and I'm the Technical Manager of the Lancashire Cyber Foundry.
Great. So today we're all going to be talking about cybersecurity and what practices you should do for your businesses. So we're going to start off with Kate, and Kate's going to give us a talk about all about cybersecurity and business support. Kate, over to you.
Thanks very much. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to come along and talk about the things that, as a cybersecurity company, we come across and that might resonate with yourselves. And maybe you could take just a few little facts away from what I'm saying and have a look at your own business. So to start off with, I think the first things that we talk to businesses about is about the value that they have in their business and what's actually valuable to them. I think we all know personally what's valuable to us in terms of we know that we have to put a password on a bank account and when we go onto a site for our bank, because we know that our money is fairly valuable to us and we don't want anybody getting their hands on it. But what is it within our own businesses that is actually valuable to us? Clearly our bank account details, our supplier details, maybe something that is IPR, so I think it's having a look at, as a company, what it is that's truly valuable to you and what you wouldn't like to be either frozen and not be able to get into or actually have stolen from you. And I think that's a really good place to start. The next point is about IT support. We come across a lot of businesses out there that say, I'm absolutely fine for IT support. I've got Steve down the road. He knows loads about websites. He looks after all my IT. He's got me online over the pandemic, and he's done a great job. Anytime we want him to come out, he comes out and makes sure that all our systems are absolutely tip top, and we can carry on running our business no problem. And that's absolutely great, and it's fantastic having those Steves out there that can look after your businesses. And also IT support companies, people go to IT support companies and say, this is what I want. They say, no problem, we can provide all that for you. But I would then ask the question, as a business owner, I would then ask the question, so what cybersecurity level and knowledge do you have, and where is your boundary? Do you know all about it? Do you know how to keep all these assets that I have secure? And if you don't know, then what are you going to do about it? Where do you go to next? Is there something I need to do as a business to find somebody else that can help you as my IT support? Or you know, do I need to go on a course, etc., maybe with the university or elsewhere, to actually give me some knowledge as well about cybersecurity and know what I need to about what I need to ask you as an IT support function. The next point is about businesses that we come across a lot, that they say, we have all these things in place, I know what's important to me, it's all being looked after properly. Okay, that's great, lovely, fine, you're sorted. So what about your staff? And what do they think about it? And we've been in companies where they will say, our staff don't use passwords, they don't like doing updates, it's a bit of a pain, to be honest, and so we don't really make them do that. So, fine. Leave your front door open. You know, I'm sure they wouldn't let their bank account open at home. And so I think a lot of communication with staff's got to be about them understanding what the value is within the business, not about forcing people to use passwords, forcing people to do updates, and then finding that people just don't do it. It's then actually explaining to people and agreeing within a company what's important, why it's important, and how you can all work together to make sure that it remains safe and it remains within your business and your business keeps running. The next stage for me, also within businesses that we come across across the northwest area, is maybe that they go through some sort of change and they add technology to their business, and that technology is sort of then going to be communicating within the organisation with other technology. And we do find this an example that a company that we've dealt with in the past, where they've got really great systems, they've put in a website that has got lots of traffic from their customers coming in, changing their customer details, changing the preferences they want from that company, and all of that data is going backwards and forwards from the website into their back office systems. And it works fine. But when you actually start doing penetration testing and looking at that digitalization of that whole business, actually it's not secure. And so the sorts of things that we have been involved with is actually going in and making sure that the knitting together of those systems is done in a secure way. And that's where you can bring either your IT support if they're capable of doing that, or bringing in consultants to help you. And there are many cybersecurity businesses out there that can help you with this type of thing. And the last point that I would stress about cybersecurity within businesses, and to help you sort of move forward with your business, is choosing the consultants or choosing the businesses that you work with has got to be the most important thing, really, because you've got to be able to communicate with them and you've got to be able to understand them. For me, as a managing director, I like to be able to get suppliers talking to me, supplying my business with whatever it is, nothing to do with IT, but with other areas of my business. I need to be able to understand, and I will only work with companies that I actually understand what they're talking about, and they can put it into my language and make me understand what it is that they can offer me. And I think this in technology is an area that is commonly thought that it doesn't matter in technology, because the people that understand talk a certain language, and businesses that are buying these services, they just don't understand it. And that's just not true. You've got to make sure that you get a provider, an IT support provider, a cybersecurity consultant that actually talks your language and can explain to you why you need it and what it's going to do for you and your employees and your business. And I would say that's the most important thing, with understanding the value that you've got in the business, communicating out to your staff, ensuring that you've got good IT support, and also having somebody that's giving you that support that's actually talking your language.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks, Kate. Just wondered if you could give us an example of a company that maybe has gone through, through yourselves as a service, and kind of how radically has it changed for that business? So perhaps a company who may have experienced a breach or had some sort of security attack on them, and then the services that you've provided.
We've had situations where we've worked with businesses that we've approached to start off with, and have talked to them about cybersecurity, and the sort of response to start off with has been, actually, I'm all right. I don't need this. I've got IT support, as I said before, and when we said, well, we'll come in and have a look, let's just do a survey and have a look at what support you've got. We're not treading on the toes of the IT support company, that's not our thing. But let's just see whether we can help your IT support and clearly mark out where that boundary is. And when we've actually gone in and done that, sometimes we find that, or on this particular occasion that I'm thinking of, we find that the IT support gets very defensive. And it becomes, we get that situation where they are sort of saying, oh, well, we would have done this, we've done that. We're not there to do that. We're there to help that company, and we would have gone in, help them, help their IT support. And I think what we've found with this particular example I'm thinking of is that once we've actually started working through an accreditation with them, which is the way that they wanted to go in the end, what we found was actually those IT support providers actually came back to us, and we're still now working with them on other clients, because they could see where their boundary was and they didn't see us as a threat.
Yeah.
And I think for that business, they got themselves to a point of having good IT support, being secure, but also knowing that their IT support provider was in contact with us, if they needed it.
I think that's a really good point. They are sometimes seen as integrated, but actually they can be quite separate issues that we're talking about here. The one thing that I kind of picked up on there was that ability to talk in the right language. Communication's obviously really important. That comes with knowledge as well. So here at the Lancashire Cyber Foundry, we do offer a programme which is a workshop programme that helps to educate people around cybersecurity, and some of the terminologies can be just very daunting and intimidating. So we do offer that as a service for SMEs that are eligible. Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you. Really appreciate that. We're going to move on to Geraint now, and Geraint's going to give a presentation around some hacking equipment. And this is not intended to scare you, although it may. So.
Oh, I was going to open by saying I'm intending to scare you, which will be my opening line. Well, so I guess partly my presentation is called cybersecurity after COVID, what's the worst that could happen? And I guess it's not really intended to scare you, but it can be quite scary, because as the landscape has changed, and whenever there's a sort of universal change, it's hackers and malicious users are going to try and exploit that. And so I'm kind of just going through some of the common things to think about as we sort of explore a world post-COVID. And I think probably one scenario that I think is popping up quite a lot as we're kind of doing hybrid working, or working from home, or working from cafes, is working using public Wi-Fis. And I just wanted to highlight and point out a few things that can happen with public Wi-Fis. On the right on your screens, you should see like a grey list of things. Me and a colleague were meeting with a client in I won't name where, somewhere with a public Wi-Fi. And I was struggling to connect to the Wi-Fi, so I thought, well, I'll just type in the router address, because that usually pings up with the put in your email thing. I then found a list of everyone who's connected to that Wi-Fi, their MAC addresses, which is the physical machines, and also the strength. So if I knew where the router was, I could probably roughly figure out where they were sitting. And so it's just worth bearing in mind, public Wi-Fi, you're sort of handing over some level of security to someone else. you don't know what their security is like, and you also don't know who runs that. So it's just worth bearing in mind that public Wi-Fi's can be quite dangerous. The yellow black box you see, and we've also got like this physical, we've got a physical version here. It's called a Wi-Fi Pineapple, and that's a bit of hacking kit which can be bought for about like a couple of £100. And it's used to run what's known as a man-in-the-middle attack. So you tell the router that you're a user, and you tell the users that you're a router, and it sits in the middle, and you won't know that all your information's going through that thing. One of the ways to avoid that, or reduce the risk of that, is to use VPNs, which are virtual private networks. And so, for example, Lancaster University has one here, so we can safely, as staff, connect to the internet and connect through our files and stuff securely. And it's worth considering, if you're going to have a business where you expect lots of people to work in cafes or on public Wi-Fi's, to think about using a VPN and those sorts of technologies. And also, if you are providing public Wi-Fi's in your context as well, it might be worth considering having somewhere what security you offer on that, so then people can be informed in using them. The second thing that probably is worth that's happening quite a lot is people are returning to buildings that they've not been in for a long time, and returning to systems that they've not turned on for a long time. So, for example, here we have like various Wi-Fi networks in this building that we literally turned off when we left, and are quite cautious to turn back on because we think, well, that's not been updated for 24 months, however long that's been, and so then we want to check that before we start plugging machines to it. And actually as well, people may, this is maybe less common but can happen, is people putting in equipment that can try and steal your data. So those two things on the screen there and these here are bits of bits of equipment that people can plug into your network without you knowing, and sit in the middle and scrape data. So this one's called a packet squirrel, I think, and you plug the internet into there, plug the internet out into somewhere else. And you might notice that because that shouldn't be there. But another piece of equipment, which is a land turtle, or maybe that's the other way around, but this is what it's meant to look like. So if you've got a machine that doesn't have an Ethernet port, you might get an adapter so you can adapt it. That's an adapter, but it can send all your information to someone else. So it might be worth coming back to the office and returning and seeing, right, what is there that wasn't there before, what was there before that isn't there. It's also worth pointing out, you might think, oh, well, that seems a bit kind of a pain in the arse to do, really. But there was the BBC ran quite an in-depth article on this recently. But there was a banking heist recently by North Korea, which they try and stole $1 billion in money across the world. They successfully got quite a lot of it, but the reason a lot of it was foiled is because the bank realised the printer was broken. And then they sort of thought, oh, why is the printer broken? And in pulling that thread and working out where it was broken, they then unveiled this huge heist that was happening because they realised their printer was broken. You're unlikely as a business to have billions of dollars stolen by the North Koreans, but those small things may point you to bigger things that are happening, and so it's worth doing a check as you come back. And the last thing, and I would say this is quite unlikely to happen, but worth considering, and it's just quite scary and interesting. So on the screen there is a picture of two cables. The one on the right is a cable, the one on the left is a computer. So if you were to plug that USB into your machine, that is a computer that can run software, and they are indistinguishable. And that cable on the left, you'd think, oh, it's very expensive. It's £100 to buy, and you can buy it with like next day delivery. I think it's sort of insane. So this is a very specific attack, which is quite cool. That I don't trust people lending you cables, because they could be malicious. In fact, there's also another story where people had used USB fans to try and hack reporters' things. Mm-hmm. Any USB thing you plug into your machine, you need to know where it comes from. And just to sort of show that, here's a video of someone with one of those cables hacking his wife's computer.
Hey, what's up, guys? I wanted to share a video with you that I shot last night at me and my wife's favorite boba shop. And it's kind of funny because she asked me for a charger cable to charge her phone, and I gave her an OMG cable instead. If you don't know what that is, there's a link below that describes it a lot more better. And it basically is a rubber ducky. If you're familiar with a rubber ducky, that's basically what it is. But it's more discreet because it's also a charging cable, and on top of that, you can remotely send keystrokes to it, so you're even further away, which is a pretty cool thing to have when you're a pen tester. So check it out. I hope you guys enjoy it. Peace. Boba addicts. What's wrong with these guys? I already finished mine. This is dainty. Alpha. What's up? Yeah. Hold on. Here. Aw, look it. Is it charging? Cool. Alright. Huh? What's that? Stop!
What the heck is that? I didn't touch anything.
So yeah, so that's just as simple as that. And so I know that's a very specific example. It's quite cool to watch, but that's some of the risks of working in public spaces and sort of borrowing things from people. So that just a highlight of sort of what the worst can happen and ways to defend yourself against that.
That's really good. So the worst thing that could happen is Rick Astley could be put on my screen. No, really, that's great. Thank you. Had a couple of questions. So one of the questions was, how would we know what hardware is fake or scam hardware? How do we know?
Oh, that's a good question. You don't? So,
Okay.
and I'll clarify. So you don't, and that's sort of partly the risk. So one of the devices here just looks like a normal USB to Ethernet port, but what you would need to be aware of is where you're buying them from. So if you were to buy a cable from Apple, it's incredibly unlikely that someone has intercepted that and swapped it out. But if you were to buy it from some dodgy third seller who's selling sort of knockoff versions, then that risk increases. And so what you probably want to do is buy equipment from trusted source sellers. So,
Yeah. John, can I ask you a quick question actually relating to returning to offices? So obviously one of the things we were talking about there is checking things like the printers and things like that. Obviously we work for Lancaster University, and so I think quite a lot of the staff who are returning to campus will assume that that's being done on our behalf. If you aren't in a large organisation like that, or indeed if you are, should you still go around checking and looking for things?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of cases where keyloggers, which is kind of one of the things that's missing out here, identifying a keylogger is incredibly difficult, and although we'll do our best to kind of look around everything like that, it only takes a couple of minutes to put in. So whether they've been there for 12 months, 2 years, it takes a couple of minutes to quickly put a keylogger in, and that's one of the easiest and a really difficult attack to prevent against. Like some people go down the lines of gluing up USB slots, but if you have a physical keyboard that needs plugging in, you need to expose one of those ports. So yeah, it kind of comes back to everyone's due diligence as part of cybersecurity, and also in the training to make sure that people are aware that actually if there's a blue kink in the cable, that there's a device that's there before, then knowing what that is and that it's a threat can help protect the organisation.
That's great, thank you. Another question here saying, does the panel advise following the NCSC guidelines for businesses and look at the Cyber Essentials programme? Geraint, do you
yes. It'd be really hard to say no at that, wouldn't it? But I would say Yes, and to then look further where their guidance is coming from, because theirs is a good starting point, but then theirs is quite broad because they've got to cover lots of bases. What you then want to figure out is they'll follow their guidelines and then look at specific guidelines for your sector so if you're a very hardware focused company, that might be different to if you're a cloud provider and things like that. So but yes, and then also find out where they're getting stuff from and things like that.
Kate, yeah.
I would definitely say as well. I would agree. And I'd also say that Cyber Essentials is also a really good place to start. It's something that can be followed quite easily. You can get accredited very easily, and then I think then you know that you've got the basics covered, and you can either do it yourselves, and or you can get other people to do it for you. You know, the person that looks after your IT, you can get them to do it. And you get somebody independent that if you go for a plus, you can get somebody independent that comes in and has a look at your systems as well. And I think that is a really good place to start for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, totally agree. We, again, as part of our workshop support program, we actually start to cover sort of some of the areas that the Cyber Essentials would cover on our workshop. So our first day is dedicated to getting people to understand actually what it is what does Cyber Essentials mean? What is it that they'll be looking for? And that's kind of what we cover on our support program as well. That's really great. Thank you very much. Those talks were really good, really interesting. So we're going to move on now to some scenarios. We have been presented with 3 different companies here, and we'd like the panel to discuss some of these, some of the issues and challenges that these companies will face, and also then some solutions for them. So the very first company we're going to start with, I'm going to come straight to John first of all. This is a company that is about to move into some new office spaces. So they've never had an office before. They've had a home office only, or they've all been working remotely. They want to know what infrastructure that they will need beyond like laptops and Wi-Fi, and what they perhaps need to consider when moving into an office environment. John, can I start with you?
So moving offices, physical security is kind of the big thing around this. Shared office space, is anyone else in that building going to have access to the office? What kind of information is being left around as well? Because although a lot of cybersecurity can often be focused on the technical aspects, paper and information security is just as valuable. So is there if it's a shared office space, having a clear desk policy is really, really useful. If people can just walk into the building and grab physical assets, can that be addressed? If not, then you need to start taking other precautions as well, such as our laptops encrypted, such like that. Shared networks are a real concern when you're looking at office space as well. Is it going to be the case that you and everyone else is on the same network, going back to kind of what we were talking about before? If there's shared Wi-Fi, if there's shared networks, then any machine on that network could in theory impact any of the devices on that, and stuff can move laterally in between that. Internet connectivity as well. If it's a shared building, is it shared infrastructure? Would highly advise to put something like a router in or a firewall to segment traffic off so that it's only people within inside the organisation. And again, depending on the size of that, you might want to narrow that down further. As in, if you've got physical servers, they should be separated logically from your workstations. Those are the big ones that I think of when moving in.
That's really helpful. Kate, do you have anything to add to moving into physical spaces?
No, I mean, I would absolutely agree that we do think of security as just being online, as we talk about cybersecurity, but the physical assets are really important, and people leaving things around the office. And I think that's, as John says, that's where the communication that goes out and understanding what value you've got in your business is really important to you.
Yeah. You mentioned there about shared networks and things. What about guest Wi-Fi?
Yes, so guest Wi-Fi. So there's some. It used to be the case that it was way more enterprise when you were looking at separating it off. Guest Wi-Fi is absolutely something that you want to separate out from your normal play. You'll even see different SSIDs used in play areas these days to separate staff from from guests. Things like Ubiquity, again, not plugging any mates here, but they make it really easy these days to kind of offer captive portals where people can just go on, register a MAC address and do that. And also while doing that as well, you're kind of capturing. There was a really strange case for a company in France where people were jumping onto that network to abuse that network. Then all activity obviously came back to the business. If it's on the guest Wi-Fi network, you've got demonstrate that you're actually segmenting this off and that it's from people outside, and you can do things like capture MAC addresses as part of that to be able to give that back.
Geraint, can I ask you a quick question around storage? Somebody's asked here around what are the advantages or disadvantages of cloud storage versus physical storage?
Oh, wow. It's like an essay that's used to write in my degree. So, stepping back a second, so there's, security generally is always a compromise between convenience versus security. And in a similar way, what would be the most secure way to store data is to have a server in a room that's not connected to the internet, that you go and you plug it, like that sort of thing, but that's really inconvenient. And then the most convenient way is it's constantly available on the internet, but that's not very secure. And so kind of the annoying answer is it sort of depends on how valuable the data is that you're storing there. I would suggest that most cloud storages, if you double check where it's actually stored because of GDPR laws, but most cloud storages are secure enough because the big players like Amazon and Microsoft and Apple and places like that have far more security infrastructure than you as an SME can provide. That being said, if you have a very specific use case for this information, it has to be very secure, and we don't necessarily need it off the premises, or there's going to be a person in a room that uses it. You then might want to have servers that have that. That being said as well, you probably also want to have servers that back up your cloud, so that if one breaks, you've got the other, but that's a slightly separate information security answer. So, yeah.
That's really good. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to our second scenario, which is an expanding company. So this company is just about to go through quite a large expansion. They're currently got 20 staff employed, and they're about to recruit 100 in the next 6 months. So big expansion. They've already moved into their physical space, but they don't quite know what they need to consider with respect to policies, procedures, things like that. Who would like to start?
John?
Okay. Sure. So when you're expanding something like that, when like the smaller the company is or the organisation is, the easier it is to have one-on-one conversations and almost keep check with that. You need to understand that when you're scaling up to hundreds of employees, a lot of the procedural controls and checks aren't going to be good enough. You're going to need to look to implement more technical controls along the lines of kind of patch management and things like that to make sure that staff and actually machines are behaving. If you've got 200 laptops, chances are at least 2 or 3 of the might be having issues with updates, and it's up for you to be able to do that. It's not necessarily a case that the staff member isn't doing it. You've got technical issues to pick up as part of that. Mobile machines. And what people are doing around BYOD as well. Again, you can have really easy one-to-one conversations with people, what you're doing kind of thing, but the greater that expands, the less chance it is that you're going to get a handle on it. So putting really, really clear policies in place for all the new people coming in, making sure that they absolutely understand their responsibilities, making sure that training, again, it's really important to make sure that training piece is taken care of, so that all of these staff are coming in, stand the best chance to help you achieve kind of a better security environment.
BYOD?
Sorry, bring your own device. So so this is kind of people obviously turning up with their own mobiles with the best of intention, trying to help out the company, to not necessarily, I'm not expecting you to provide me with a phone, I'm happy to use my own phone, but there's a risk to the organisation as part of that needs to be understood.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Kate, would you like to add to that?
Well, I think I mean the policy. Obviously, the policy side is very important, and I think it's explaining to staff of why those policies are in place, and so I would agree with John in terms of it's not just the case of this is what we've got to do now because the policy says so. It is the why how does it affect us, and you know, what will happen if we don't? What will happen to us all if we don't? You know, we need a business here at the end of it, so that's quite important.
What about training for these individuals? Obviously, going from 20 to 100, you can do training reasonably easily with 20 people. You know, how would you recommend that people go around doing things like that?
Well, I think that it's taking small snippets of information. You know, in my business, in other areas of my business, in electronics and on control systems, which is the other area that we work in cybersecurity, as well as support of control systems. We do lots of toolbox talks, and they're really, really effective, because you can get lots of people with small bits of information. People take it in. You know, you're not having to sit through hours of a training course that they might not be interested in. It's literally a blast of a small thing. Talk about emails, what they should be doing with emails. You know, we sort of hear about phishing emails. Well, what does that mean for us? What do they need to do? And just keep regularly doing it. Have a plan that says we do these toolbox talks on a regular basis, but we make them short, interesting, and relevant to what they're doing.
That's really great, thank you. Just reading, there's a question that's come in, which is actually, I think, related to what you just said. So the question is, what's the best way of keeping on top of our cybersecurity policies and the staff? And I think that's probably what you've just answered. Do you want to have anything to add?
Just to add to that, there's we often do an exercise. Well, my point being, you should check them by creating scenarios and going, in this scenario, what would we do? And then seeing if the policy works. And we in software development, when we've been building apps, to see if the app works, we'll often ask loads and loads of questions. We call that exercise, what if their fingers fall off? In that, you keep asking questions until you get to such a ridiculous question of, well, how would the app work if their fingers fell off? And then you realise, well, we must have asked every single question if that's our only question. And similarly, going through your policy and just asking, well, what if the person gets fired? What if the person loses their laptop? What if the machine's left on and just asking, have we covered all those bases? And then hopefully you'll find the gaps before the gaps are exploited by someone else. So.
So one thing that's really, really useful, and what can be quite daunting when you're looking at something like a policy that needs to incorporate and kind of capture everything like that, yes, you can do, but it's highly advised not to try and do that on your own and write your own policy. There are loads of really good information out there already. There's template sites, there's standards that make all of this much easier. Please don't start again from scratch. A lot of it's already been thought through, and with the training as well, kind of plug in the NCSC on the work they've done. They've got some really good training and packages as part of that, SCORM content that can be used in e-learning modules as well.
That's really helpful, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move on to our third and final business scenario. So we have a couple of friends here who are wanting to set up a business. They're going to be setting up from their home. They currently work for an employer. So this is their first time of setting up their business. So it's going to be a startup company, very exciting for them. But they're going to be doing this from their house. What would you recommend for them, and what do they need to have in place? Kate, I'll start with you. I
would say for them is go to the setup guide that's available from the NCSC. Now, that is the area that I would go to. I would absolutely concur with John in terms of do not start from scratch. There are people out there that have done all of this over and over again, and you can get this information. You can also go to organisations in the area that are the Chamber of Commerce, etc., etc., etc. There are a number of organisations that can help you and say, this is what you need to do to get yourself set up digitally.
What about home Wi-Fi? Is that secure to set up a business from?
It can be.
Yeah.
Depending on how, let's say it's all risk-based, depending on what data you let your access in, because all of this is underpinned by the types of data. If you're dealing with government secrets, then probably not. You shouldn't be sharing that on the same network that you're using with your kids. If it's a closed business and you're dealing with email addresses and and addresses, then yes, that's probably proportionate. It's understanding what risk it is. There's nothing to say that a home network is inherently insecure. Things like VPNs that can sit on top of that can kind of mitigate some of the risk that you have as part of that. But yeah, there's no reason that you should implement a enterprise Wi-Fi in your home to do that.
Okay. Geraint, do you have anything to add in terms of like cybersecurity in the house?
I think probably, and this sounds really obvious, but people don't do it, is to change your home Wi-Fi password, because people don't naturally think to do that, and suddenly then, like John was just saying, you've sort of got it's convenience versus security type thing of how inconvenient you want your home network to be, but probably you don't want your business password on the bottom of your router, so that's probably the first thing to change.
Yeah.
Just one in general on new companies. I mean, when you're setting up a new company, whether it's someone at home or whether it's just someone who might expand, getting things in place and understand at the very start is the ideal place to do it. We know it's daunting. We know it's probably not at the top of the list for someone who's really excited, who's looking at doing everything like that. The biggest issue, and where you will find it really difficult to do things, is when you're going in and trying to implement security into an organisation that has not had it in from the start. For you to go back, not understand what assets you've got, not understand the data, have staff that have gotten into a way of working which is insecure. If you can, from the very first moment of starting up something new, get a really good understanding for your staff, a really good policy, a really good asset list, and all those things that are just so difficult to do when you go in halfway through anywhere, it's the perfect time to do it.
Kate, I've got a question here that you might be able to answer. They say, I've outsourced my IT services, so what is my responsibility as a business owner?
You still do have responsibility. Unfortunately, for us businesses, we still have responsibility. Like financial services, you still have responsibility.
Yep.
So yes, unfortunately, outsourcing is not an answer. It's great because you don't have to do it yourselves, you don't have to provide it yourselves, but you have to be able to take responsibility for it. And that takes me back to my original points about making sure that the person that is doing it for you can tell you what they're doing, can tell you how they're meeting the responsibilities that you have. That's really important.
So I've got some questions that have just been firing through, so I'm just going to ask them to all of you now, if that's okay. So the first one is around online transactions. So what's the most secure way of conducting online transactions? John?
Online transactions, whether it's customer or whether it's business, if you're dealing with customer transactions, you're going to need to, and taking credit cards, payments, which quite a lot of people with, you need to have an understanding of something called PCI DSS, which is the payment card industry data security standard, and that's the responsibility of the merchant, I think it's called in PCI terms, and they need to understand how they're dealing with credit cards and such like that. The easiest way, let's say Lancaster University, we've got bars, we've got restaurants, there's lots of other things, we have to adhere to that, and the standard goes from someone who's one person in a shop who's taking credit card details to an enormous franchise, and simplification is the best way, and PCI DSS can go from what's called a SAQ, which is a self-assessment questionnaire, which can be 22 really, really easy questions if you've simplified your payment card model, through to 340 odd, I can't remember the number, really difficult questions. It becomes a really bad job if you fall onto the SAC-D side, which is everything. If you're using merchants and service providers that are PCI DSS, and again, it's coming to that understanding. Yes, it's not my responsibility, but you can kind of farm out to these external companies for doing this, and it's just your responsibility to make sure that they're compliant. So a lot of that's covered as part of the PCI DSS standard. But if you're using hardware that's patched, if it's up to date, so patching up to date, password protected, multi-factor authentication, if all of that's in there, then that's a really good step to protecting you, like any transactions and card data.
That's really, really good and very helpful. I'm going to come to you for this question, Kate. So somebody here said, I don't think my business is that valuable to hackers. Why are they going to bother hacking me?
Well, that's not true. You're a business, and you've got valuable things in those businesses. I mean, it just take back to absolute basics. The one example that I can give for small businesses is a phishing email. Somebody that receives an email that works in payroll, that has, and this is an example that we've come across, that gets an email saying, oh, could you just change my bank account details? I know it's payroll tomorrow. I know that you're probably doing it at the moment and you're really busy, but could you just do, because I forgot to tell you, thanks very much, mate, see you soon, blah, 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 blah. Those bank account details were changed and money was sent into a different bank account. You have a responsibility to your employees to pay them, and your money's going somewhere else, so you're paying out twice. I think your money's quite important. That's quite a valuable asset to you, is your money.
Yeah.
So even on that basic level, that's communication with staff, that's making sure that staff understand and understand what they should be doing, what a phishing email is, maybe sitting back and saying, should I be making this change, or should I be ringing this person up, or whatever. That's a really simple example. But definitely you will have valuable assets within your business.
Yeah. Geraint, do you want to add to that?
I was going to say, yeah, it's also about something like relative value. So something that I find valuable for me may not be valuable for you. And so then, in a simpler way, you think, oh, why would you try and steal it? But because it's valuable to me, you can exploit that. So if you ransomware is a hack that basically withholds the stuff from you. Very rarely in ransomware is anything transferred to the hacker. They're just stopping you from taking it. So it's like putting a bike lock on someone else's bike. You've sort of not stolen it, but you've just withheld it from that person. And so just it being valuable to you is something that can be exploited. And then, so like if you think the NHS, nothing was, the sort of ransomware WannaCry, nothing was actually taken, it was just stopped. But then it's very valuable to surgeons to see medical records. It's not valuable to the hacker, they don't care. So it's also about relative value.
Mm-hmm. So whilst we're talking about kind of obviously the time and effort, somebody said, how much time should I actually spend on cybersecurity when I'm supposed to be doing the rest of my business? John?
Is that from a business owner?
Yeah. Yeah.
It needs to be proportionate. Like I say, there's no point in if there's two people in your company, there's no point in dedicating one person to cybersecurity. It doesn't make sense. The business needs to operate, and it's a business decision at the end of the day, not necessarily that. You do have due diligence and responsibility as the data controller, which is the person who's taking the data under GDPR. So you do have a legal requirement to at least cover the bases, and things like Cyber Essentials and checking those demonstrate that what you're actually doing is in line with like recommendation and all adds to that, and it shouldn't need to be a full-time job. Let's say depending on like a small company, the more you expand that out, yes, you are looking at kind of dedicated IT staff and then the bigger dedicated security staff, but yeah, it's just whatever, it's covering the absolutely necessary while still allowing the business to function.
Geraint, I've got a question for you. My accountant has just said that we shouldn't use Zoom for discussing my finances. Sure. Why?
Oh, well, I'm going to be careful for this, aren't I? So there's an article on our website that we wrote about very early in lockdown when sort of Zoom wasn't as ubiquitous. So Teams versus Zoom versus Google Meet. And sort of Zoom seems to have won that battle. I think Teams is bringing it back. But anyway, but what are the differences and what should you use and what shouldn't you use? There have been... I'm trying to phrase it in a way that's not going to end like us in trouble. So where data is stored is something to worth consider. Zoom is a Chinese-owned it's a Chinese company, whereas Microsoft is an American company. That has ramifications for where data is stored. But then also there have been questions around the security of Zoom. That being said, so this is on Zoom, but this is a public meeting, so we're not too worried if this gets leaked or wherever. But equally, people who are over cautious or careful about where data goes might say, "Oh, I'd prefer to use this method of communication." So, and similarly, also as we're returning, if you've got something that's really secure and you don't want it leaked, don't do it online. If you can do meetings in person with data, then actually that's a more secure way, because you know as much as you can that you're not being hacked or something's not going to be leaked. So, yeah.
Another question that's come in. What are the panel's thoughts on cyber insurance? Kate.
I think it's good. I think it's relative to the size of business you are, how much assets you've got that are valuable. I think it serves a purpose. I think if you are a large company and you've got things and that you are concerned about, there is insurance out there that can cover you, but it doesn't cover the fact of you getting hacked and not being secure. So I would suggest to start off with, get yourself secure.
John, do you have anything to add to that, or do you agree?
It's a hot issue at the minute. I'm laughing because it's particularly topical over the last couple of weeks. So I'll put aside my thoughts. It's the industry has morphed and changed over the last 6 months due to the number of big ransomware attacks. So cyber insurance has dramatically changed as underwriters are having an understanding about actually the implications of what they're trying to do. Cyber insurance over the next couple of years needs to have a good look at itself and actually understand how it's going to be able to do this in a way. If people are taking out cyber insurance, and again, if you are able to get cyber insurance for a decent premium, you need to look at your liability values and understand what's actually part of it. Sometimes it can be really, really useful. It can cover legal. It can cover things like informing users when there's a breach. It can be as part of media campaigns. You can set up help desk. They can even bring in incident response and to some degrees pay ransomware. So the right insurance is fine. You just need to have a good look through that policy and understand what's actually covered as part of it.
That's great, thank you. So last question. They've got a good idea for an app, and they think it will make their business more efficient, but don't have the technical knowledge. Where can they get the support, Geraint?
The Lancashire Cyber Foundry.
Correct answer.
And there we go. Yeah. So to expand on that answer, so the Lancashire Cyber Foundry is a European Union funded, as well as all these other funders, a program that supports the sort of research and development stage of ideas and projects. So often that's a very expensive process. If you go to an app developer and say, I've sort of had this idea, that sort of bit from getting the idea to very specifically what you want them to build can take a long time and consequently money. We are trying to get business and services into Lancashire and trying to get you to that stage quicker and cheaper. So we provide that research and development time. So then your next step can be, here's exactly what I want. And sometimes here's a prototype of exactly what I want. Can you now build the proper version for me?
Yeah, that's great. So that's the end of all our questions. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone for joining us. Just to reiterate, so we're the Lancashire Cyber Foundry. We can support you through quite a lot of what we've just discussed, including the technical development. And we hope you can join us next time. Our email address again is cyberfoundry@lancaster.ac.uk, and you can find us on LinkedIn. Thank you very much, and thank you to the panel. Thank you. Thanks.